Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. We're so delighted to have you with us in our third session, in our third and last day of Miss Global Forum. I'm Reema Hibani, and I'm gonna be your MC for the day. Our third session is entrepreneur, titled as Fast Money, Easy Come, Easy Go. I personally find this session very interesting and important. So please join me in welcoming our moderator for the day, Mr. Dave Crane. Yes, thank you. And please welcome me in joining our special guest for the day, Mr. Athar Ahmed. And Mr. James Hardy. And our last speaker, Shershah Hassan. Welcome, and please enjoy our session.
Thank you so much. Here's the thing, right? I'd like to introduce who everybody is on the panel, so then you can Google them, connect with them on LinkedIn, and then become lifelong friends. They're very successful business owners, and you really do want to know more about them. I'm going to start off with a gentleman. Can everyone hear me okay? If I speak too quickly, let me know by going, oh. I mean, I'll know to slow down. First of all, the gentleman we have on my left is Athar Ahmed. He's the visionary CEO of Legion Network, guiding a blockchain-driven super app to global success. And his expertise is blending technology with business acumen that's propelled this platform to new heights, impacting millions of people. Please put your hands together for Athar! Very good. Next to him, we have a gentleman, James Hardy, who's the head of global retail and market development for Flutterwave. Now, he's a seasoned entrepreneur and leader with a diverse background from Alibaba and many other organizations, now shaping global strategies at Flutterwave, and his journey involves invaluable lessons, which we're going to find out about. Please put your hands together. Mr. James Hardy. Oh, you got a fan there as well. It's a good start, isn't it? Wonderful. You brought your own fan club. And last but not least, on the end there, we have a gentleman who's the co-founder and CEO of KalPay. And Shershah Hassan is a co-founder and CEO, as I mentioned. His passion for finance and commitment to financial inclusion has positioned KalPay as a pioneering platform in Pakistan. Please put your hands together for Shershah. Right. So, wonderful. We've got a number of different questions to ask. I'm going to lead on that. And if you do have a question later on, hopefully we'll have time for you to ask those questions. If not, I'll just carry on talking, because as you've probably noticed, I like doing that. So, let's start off, first of all, Athar. If we're looking towards the fact that your business is just off the chart, I haven't seen the growth of anything apart from maybe Threads-ish compared to what your organization has done. Let me just, in fact, this will get a woo out of the audience. Legion Network reached 4 million users in only 2 months. Give me a woo. He's happy. They couldn't care less. What's the secret to such growth?
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon everybody. Thank you for being here today. I think it's a great question, and I think the most important thing for me is to make sure that you have everything in place, because if you want to grow fast, of course you have to think big, but you have to have all of the things in place for the recipe for you to be able to scale at such growth. And even though 4 million users sounds great, we could have done 40 million if we learned from the mistakes that we made. So we made sure that everything was in place, from understanding the industry that we're part of, understanding the trends that are taking place, and how we can maximize our potential by combining the best trends today. For example, you see blockchain and crypto, many people still don't understand, but it was a very big trend. And if you look at the world of super apps, it's a very big trend around the world. Like, you got WeChat in China, you got many super apps now emerging. So we combined the trend of super apps that we see today with the trend of blockchain and crypto. And by combining those trends and making sure that we actually develop from the ground up to provide a beneficial service, that's the reason that we achieved those numbers.
Can I just refer, because you mentioned super apps. Is that like an app that wears like a big cape? Or is it, what's a super app for anybody who doesn't know?
A super app is an application that combines multiple services into one place. You see many companies like Uber today, they are creating super apps. Even Elon Musk, X, he wants to combine it and turn it into a super app. So you don't have to go to different places in order to get different services. You will see the big giants releasing one single application where you can get everything that you need. So, for example, there's many super apps in shopping. You can get your groceries, you can get a taxi, such as Kareem. That's a super app as well. So it just makes life more convenient and accessible from one place.
It's a one-stop shop where you get all the data and you keep the customer without them going elsewhere. That's
Absolutely,
brilliant. Yeah. James, you've got vast experience in different markets, but just before we answer this question, how many people are running their own business in the room? Okay. How many people are looking to start their own business? And how many people just came in because it was a good thing to do this afternoon and you thought... So when we're looking at people starting their businesses in different markets, and you've been doing this for quite some time, what would you see as the challenges and opportunities for emerging markets to do those startups?
Thank you. Thank you all for having me here. It's a great pleasure. I think I've worked across Africa, across the Middle East, across India, China, and a lot of Asia, if not most of Asia. And I think the opportunities within emerging markets, it's a twin-edged sword. You need at least some base of infrastructure if you're really going to do something that scales. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. But you also get huge advantage from the fact that there is a lot less competition when you are in emerging markets because there are just far less people who have the education and resources to really focus on that product or offer that's going to scale. I think the second piece of it is that what people fail very often to understand is that so much of scaling fast-growing businesses is culture. The idea that my product works in X country and so therefore I can take it to Y, it works in Vietnam so I can take it to Malaysia, it works in India so I can take it anywhere else. There are very few companies that have successfully built businesses across different cultures because there are so many nuances, and that is a huge challenge. There are many, many companies that have built businesses within one culture, sometimes within two cultures, but across multiple different cultures, apart from very simple businesses, funny enough, like Calendly or businesses like that. Those simple businesses can scale very easily, but if you're doing anything that has any complexity at all, then if you don't take advantage of or don't take into account the cultural element. And the other thing I think is that consumer businesses, you want to start narrow and then go wide. So you want to dominate somewhere before you really go wide. And very often people launch into 4 or 5 countries and they boil the ocean and they fail. So I think that would be the overall lesson from emerging countries.
I'm going to double down that question before I move on to our next question for Shershah. When you say you've got to start narrow, ultimately, every business is in response to asking the question, what do they get out of this? How do you do that when you choose to start narrow? You've really got to look at the data. Do you do some checking out the market? What's the questions that you should be asking before you make that decision?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the first question is, am I fulfilling a need within the country or the culture that I'm in? And the second question is, am I fulfilling that need to a population that can scale? So there's no point building a super app, let's say, for actuaries who make up, 0.3% of the population, because unless it's incredibly high value, you're not going to have a business that has any value. Yeah. So ultimately, you're looking for need and where there's a gap, and you're looking for the ability to scale. It has to be something which can scale in terms of the number of people that it impacts, and it also has to be something that can scale because there's very little manual or human intervention. This is for fast growth. I mean, obviously, you can build a big consultancy. Nobody builds a big consultancy fast. It's slow. If you want fast growth, then it has to be as automated and as simple as possible. And there are different frameworks, which we'll discuss later, I'm sure, around how to think about that.
Well, thank you. We're going to get a chance to ask some questions later on. Just want to ask one little question. The formula for being paid, if everybody here understands what it is, let me just throw it out there because it'll make more sense of what we're going to be talking about in the future of today's session. The formula for being paid is this. This is why you get paid what you get paid. Everyone else gets paid what they get paid. There's 2 factors. First of all, the effect of a job that you do. And secondly, how cheaply you can be replaced by somebody else. So bear that in mind when we're talking about discussions here about what you need to focus on. It's not just popularity, it's that certain market niche that you need to be able to hit. So moving on that point, Shershah, as KalPay focuses on financial inclusion, what advice do you have for startups like we might have in the room to address social challenges through what you do?
Thank you so much, Dave. Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to be here. So, I'll go back to 21 when we started off KalPay. So KalPay started off as a buy now, pay later, very similar to what you see in Saudi Arabia. You see Tamara, you see Tebi. We were the largest buy now, pay later in Pakistan at one point. And gradually over the past 1 year, our thesis has evolved, and now we are doing impact financing. So in Pakistan, you see that there's a big issue of financial inclusion. And just for comparison, probably there are more credit cards in one district of Riyadh than all of Pakistan combined, and those are the numbers that we're looking at. So what we wanted to do was that how can we, through our products, give back to the community, give back to the society, and that's where we started doing education financing. We do productive asset lending. So for example, in Pakistan, we work with Kareem, and all the Kareem captains can exclusively get a smartphone on installments through us. Now these are the segments, or these are the clusters which no financial institution or no bank was catering to. So that's how we are giving back to the society and creating that impact. For someone who's trying to step into the fintech industry or any other startup, and their major focus is on giving back to the society or bringing about a social impact, the first thing is how do you position yourself? You need to understand that is social impact a byproduct of what you're doing, or is that the main focus of what you're doing? Because that will really set the direction, right? Because if you look at every startup around you, there's one aspect of social impact in all of them. Even for Kareem, they're employing thousands of people across the globe, so that's certainly a social aspect to it. So you need to really think that through. And then, once that is clear, you really need to focus on unit economics and on building a sustainable business, because when you're a venture-backed company, you need to be a for-profit company, and you cannot. So you need to distinguish yourself from a not-for-profit and a for-profit company. So you need to think about monetization, and that's an issue. What happens with a lot of social impact companies, when it's time to monetize their products, they're unable to do so. So those two things I think should be on the top of their mind if they're thinking about bringing about social impact through their products.
Does everybody understand the difference between non-profit and not-for-profit? Because they seem very similar, and I know lots of top entrepreneurs get it mixed up. Do you want to explain what the difference is between the two?
I would like you to add to that.
Okay, so non-profit means you don't make a profit. Not-for-profit means that everyone gets paid, but you're not looking to make money out of the organization. You put it back in to grow and reach more people. So there is a big distinction to make. So we've got lots of questions I want to ask, but I want to just stick on the fintech thing. How many people here are into fintech, cryptocurrency, and you've got a wallet? How many people here, so a couple of people, or maybe got really heavy arms, I just don't want to do it. How many people here are kind of like, I don't want to because I don't know what's going to happen next about it? Okay, and a lot of people who just don't like me and don't join in with anything. So that's interesting to see with the fintech, because I find that certainly we talked about emerging markets and the opportunities of what we're going to be looking here. Certainly fintech is adopted in lots of different countries, and crypto in lots of different countries, because of the instability of maybe the government or instability of the coinage. And it's a great way to be able to do micro business as a direct result of that. So when you're looking at creating that, do you think that the government makes a big impact, or would you say that you can do it without getting the government's blessing in any of these different countries you're working with?
I think the government's blessing is needed in every business, especially in fintech, because of two primary reasons. The first one is regulations. The regulatory environment in our country, because I come from Pakistan, and in everything that we do, we are 5 years behind the Western world. So something that's happening today in the US, we'll probably do it by the end of 2030. Our regulators and our government is a bit slower to catch up, but if the regulators are able to take the right direction, that really enables the ecosystem. So first, as point is about having a good regulatory environment, and the second one is, so when you are, especially in the fintech space, it's not just about what you are doing; it's also about what the ecosystem is doing. Because, for example, if I am trying to digitize lending, I won't be able to do that if I don't have other players in the ecosystem who can help me digitize payments, for example. The biggest issue that we face in Pakistan currently is that it's a predominantly cash-driven economy. So I've seen people carry up to $500,000 riyals in cash because they had to buy a car. That's how expensive cars are in Pakistan, by the way. And that's a big use case because because of various reasons, tax evasion and whatever. But you need to enable the whole ecosystem, and that's where the government's roles comes in. Not one player can bring a change. It's about building those partnerships, working together, and that's what we're right now really focusing on too.
So when you see these people carrying those big bags full of cash, let me know. My brother's a really fast runner, and he'll be able to... No, I'm joking. So let's go back to the entrepreneurial mindset. For many of the people here running their own business, they're already in that kind of stream of thinking. But the term entrepreneur, of starting your own business, of going to make yourself successful, is going to happen more and more as an alternative to going to university and then going to get a job in an establishment and going on. What would you say, and this is one by one for each of you, what are the key qualities you would say about being a successful entrepreneur? What makes you so good at what you do, and what would you say other people should have as well?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that for you to be successful, it's going to take time. And most businesses are like babies. That's the way I like to think of it. So you will never rely on a baby that's just been born. You have to nurture the baby. You have to be able to reinvest. And you have to let the baby grow. And in the future, just like you said, you have to keep putting back into the business. So the psychology should not be, I can replace my job immediately by starting a business. Entrepreneurship is about providing value and a service that people want. And that takes time. So for me, it's very important. I used to have a mindset before, like I want to quit my job. I just want to be a businessman. I want to be an entrepreneur. But through experience, I realized that it's not just about being fast and making quick decisions. So now I tell people, if you have a job, you're in the best position today to start a business because you have a source of income that you can rely on. So you don't have to rely on the business that's a baby that you just started. So it makes a lot of sense for you to make sure that you're stable in a position to nurture your business, and that way you're in the right place, the right mind frame to launch a business and nurture this business without being desperate. Desperation leads to actions that don't make sense. So for that reason, I think it's very important for your psychology and your mindset to be correct. And have a long-term vision, because even if you make fast money like this topic is about, you don't want it to go fast. And if you have a long-term mindset, you will think of a sustainable business that makes sense, and you will become like the Googles and the Microsofts that are here after the 20, 30 years of the internet boom. Those companies are still here because they had a long-term vision. And I think not having to rely on your business to provide for your immediate income is the best way to start a business because you're thinking long-term.
It's a great answer. Not everybody has that luxury, but it's good if you can start doing that because it means that your side hustle is effectively what is like a sidecar next to a motorbike. You can grow your business and choose to jump onto it as to when you do and so on. So, James, what's your thoughts on that? What makes a great mindset for an entrepreneur?
I think there are probably 6 or 7 components that you want to build. I think the first one is actually self-belief. And that's a challenge for a lot of people, that you have to actually believe that you can be an entrepreneur and that you can build a big business. And to some extent, I think that comes to people at different times. I would love to be like these guys in their 20s. They were building these businesses. I started my first business when I was 44, and it became the largest Europe to China exporter in our sector. So it became quite a big business. But I didn't have the self-belief when I was in my 20s or early 30s, and really I went down a corporate route. So I was sort of building skills. I was learning about M&A. But I think self-belief is huge, and if you don't have that self-belief, there are ways you can go and get it, and you can read a lot about from all these gurus out there, people like Tony Robbins and people like this, who can really teach you about self-belief, and that's a big part of it. So I think you have to believe. I think you also have to have a very big vision, because if you don't have a big vision, then it won't drive you to doing the work. I think the other thing is you have to spend time with the right people, and there's a ton of research that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, and that applies to your weight, that applies to your health, it applies to your relationships, and it definitely applies to your business mindset, where if you're spending time with people who say it can't be done or it won't be done, or if your partner constantly tells you it can't be done or it won't be done, it's very, very difficult to succeed. It's another piece. You want to be spending time. I think the other piece is to actually be lucky, and luck is not a matter of luck. And again, there's a lot of research on this. The luckiest people are those who say yes. So you get out, you go to events. If you're asked to something, if you're asked to a party, if you're asked to go somewhere, you generally say yes. And I think that's a really, really big piece of it. I think the other thing is that you're constantly learning. In the era of the internet, there is no excuse not to be able to very, very quickly learn. I think books that you read about Bill Gates and everybody talking about the luxury of learning and that he's reading all these books, you can learn so much in a 1-hour video from Ray Dalio or any of these guys who build these huge funds. Exceptional. So I think learning is a really, really key part of it, is to decide on the area that you're looking at and to learn really fast. And there's a lot out there. And I think the other thing is liquidity, which is what you're talking about, which is desperation. When you're desperate, you make bad decisions. So build at least a pool of cash and keep a pool of cash. It's such a simple thing to say, so that you are making good long-term decisions. You're not desperate. You don't have to take the first thing that comes along. And then finally, the seventh factor, I think, is to think like a producer and not a consumer. And there's a book which I absolutely love. I'm not a fan of the title, but it's called Millionaire Fastlane. It's a stunningly good book to understand money and to understand how to build businesses fast. By far the best book I've ever come across. And he talks endlessly about thinking like a producer, not a consumer. Every time you're in a shop, it's not, oh, why do I like that product? It's, oh, what did they think about when they built that product? Every time you're using a product, every time you're using an app, a super app, what is it I like about this? Not, how can I just consume more and more? And that completely changes your mindset. When you start to think like a producer, not a consumer, it changes your mindset in everything. When you rent a car, you're thinking, how can I rent cars to people? Not, how can I be renting a car? When you buy a product, you're not thinking, how can I buy this product? You're thinking, how can I be the person who produces this product? It's a completely different mindset. That was a long answer.
It's a great answer. When you said Millionaire Fastlane, who's it by?
MJ DeMarco.
MJ DeMarco.
I don't know him. I've never met him. I think he's written by far the best book ever about money and about virtual businesses and digital businesses. It's a stunningly good book.
Fascinating. One of the things there's a couple of things that you mentioned there. First of all, when you don't believe that you can do it, it's called imposter syndrome. Google that and find solutions to it to help you to be able to move forward with it. And also, when somebody says to you it can't be done, what they're actually saying is they can't do it, not you. They can't do it, not you. So don't confuse what they're saying with what actually is going on in your business and your mind as well. It's very important to separate that. So with that, thoughts on being an entrepreneur? You're a very successful entrepreneur. What would you say that you should do, and what makes a mindset about right?
I think just building on what Athar and James said already, two things that I think are super important. The first one is that you need to have a positive mindset, because whenever we talk about entrepreneurship, whenever we talk about startups, we're always talking about the glitter and the glamour that comes with it. All the LinkedIn articles that we see, but you don't read or get to know about what goes behind it. And trust me, over the past 2 to 3 years, ever since I've been working on my business, I think it has given me moments when I've been the happiest, but it has also given me moments when I was at my lowest throughout my life. I'm not that old compared to what James said. I'm just 26, but still, in my 26-year life, I have been the lowest because of the business. So you need to have a positive mindset. And then a lot of people, 95% of the people that you come across, especially when you're trying to lend to people in Pakistan, when I started my business, people said this is impossible. Let the banks do it, because it's a tricky market. There are no regulations. You cannot enforce the law. How will you do it? Even till date, some people very close to me, come and say this to me, that you should stop doing it, probably get a job, or make more money. So you need to have that positivity within you to be able to maneuver yourself out of these circumstances, and that's going to happen time and time again. As an entrepreneur, there are times when you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what to do, but at the same time, you have like 30, 40, or probably 100 people within your team who are looking up to you. So probably, and I'm very open about it, probably I cried myself to sleep the night before because things got so tough. But the next morning you need to show up at the office with so much
Was that
positivity.
yesterday? The night before?
No.
Okay.
I've been happy ever since.
Because we can have a group hug if
Yeah.
Okay, carry on. Sorry.
No, I went to Mama Noora last night, so I'm happy.
All right.
So, but the next thing you need to have that positive attitude because a lot of people then look up to you as well. And the second thing that comes with it is that when you're building a business, what is it that you're building for? If you're doing it for money, then my suggestion to you is that don't do it because that should never be the end goal of whatever you're doing because the last thing, even at least in my 2 or 3 year journey, the last thing that should be on your mind is that, I'm doing this so I can, be a millionaire. Of course, that always is the end goal. Then, I'll have a big exit. I'll sell my company at $1 billion. But you need to have a different mindset. Probably think about giving back to the community. Think about changing people's lives. Think about bringing impact. If you're working for the people, if your mindset is human-centric, and that's when you will do good. And during the lowest moments, that really keeps you doing this as well. So that's my take on that.
Excellent. Okay, so now we've looked at the mindset of entrepreneurs. Let's look at the skill sets and what you need to be able to do or what you need to be able to learn and whether you should just throw yourself from the deep end and, as I say, jump and grow wings on the way down. What skills would you need to have in order to be an entrepreneur starting a business of your choice today?
I think it's very important to understand that it's going to be very difficult. You're going to have to be resilient. You're going to have to be able to learn new skills. And the best way to learn, I believe, is to fail. Because there's really no such thing as failure, just feedback. So the more feedback that you get, the more you can change. And it's very more likely for you to be successful. So I think skills, one famous quote that I always remember is, if you work from 9 to 5, it's what you do from 5 to 9 that makes you rich. So you have to do things that nobody else is willing to do. When people are tired and they want to go sleep, are you going to be that person that does a bit more research and development and starts their plan? Are you going to be that person that's willing and searching and seeking new skills? Like with all this new technology that's coming out, you see the TikToks and you see the YouTubes and you see the AI that's coming out today. How many people actually study how this is going to benefit their business? Because some people will never know. And some people have already started. So you have to be first. You have to be willing to know that in this day and age, there's so much more competition. So you have to be fast. To make fast money, to make a business that grows fast, you have to fail fast. You have to learn fast, and you have to do it now. So I think that's a really big part of the big now, is understanding that all of those skills that people took time with before, it's a very competitive market. You're not just competing with people in your region now. Everybody is focusing on a digital landscape, and people in every corner of the world are competing in your industry. So it's what makes you different. It's going to be the will and the energy that you have that makes you different. And I think that's the main skill. Obviously, there's going to be specific skills for your industry that you have to learn. And many people have skills. Like my little brother, like he said, he's a consumer. He plays games. So I'm trying to change his mindset. There's other gamers that are producers making videos and streaming. I know people that watch TikTok all day, but then I know people that are making money via TikTok. So it's how you use your tools efficiently that can really start your business. And in this day and age, it's very easy, but only if you find how it's done.
Very interesting. How many people in this room are gamers? Okay. How many people don't game at all? Look at that. Isn't that strange? I thought we'd get the same here. You know why? My wife won't let me have a PlayStation. She stopped me. See, that's true. She's probably watching. So your thoughts on that, about skills that you need to have, James?
So I think to cover the sort of universe of potential businesses and startups, obviously these require generic skills. For specific businesses, you'd need specific skills. A software business, you'd need to be able to code. If you were to look at generic businesses, I actually think the number one skill is the ability to negotiate. Now, it probably makes no sense in a Saudi audience, in a Saudi culture, to talk to people about negotiation because people, fundamentally, it's built into the culture in a way that maybe it's not so much in the West. However, I think the ability to really understand all types of negotiation, not just red negotiations, I win, you lose, but also overall negotiations, how do we all win? I think is really valuable, and to understand and to even read about and to watch videos about and to really understand how to negotiate in different cultures is hugely valuable. When I started my career originally as a lawyer. I did a lot of mergers and acquisitions for many years in the US and in the UK. Well, actually everywhere really, but mainly in the US. And the one thing I learned in that is that many deals fell apart and many fundings fell apart, people trying to get funding, because there was just a cultural misunderstanding during the negotiation. So I think learning the skill of negotiation is an incredibly important skill which actually transfers across every single part of business. And it's amazing the number of entrepreneurs who never really got the benefit from what they did because they weren't good enough at negotiating. And that would be the same for everything. And throughout your life, you want to be able to capture the value that you're creating. And there will always be people who will try and capture the value that you're creating, and you want to make sure that you can do it. So I think that's part one. I think part two is to really understand money and understand how money works. If you're going to try and make a lot of money, that's really where to go. Again, I would refer you back to Millionaire Fastlane. I read a lot. I watch a lot of videos. It's the best content I've ever come across. Buy that book. Saves me a lot of telling you things. Just superb book. But I think it's really understanding what money does. And I think the other thing is to have at least a broad understanding of macroeconomics. And again, you can go to YouTube, watch the videos of Ray Dalio. He does all these great videos. He runs the world's largest hedge fund. He does all these great videos on macroeconomics. If you understand macroeconomics, you can then understand the framework that sits behind any business that you're going to be building. You can understand what governments are trying to do, what regulators are trying to do, what they're trying to do on wealth. And even if you were to, let's say, look at cryptocurrency, if you understand currencies and what gives currencies value, then you understand cryptocurrencies and whether that cryptocurrency is valuable or not. An amazing number of people, particularly young people, have rushed into cryptocurrency without understanding that if there's not something backing that currency, or if there's not an asset that sits behind it, then there is no value, unless there's some other type of value that's being created, blockchain, whatever else it may be. So I think those would be the three: negotiation, understanding money, understanding broadly, big picture macroeconomics, and what drives economies, because that allows you to delve down. And then I think finally, just the point that you were making in terms of persevering. When you're young, you have the ability, because you A, have the time, and B, you generally don't have the commitments, that you can just get out there. So you want to have a bias to action. Your time frames should be short. How big a business can I build in 18 months? How big a business can I build in 2 years? And always a bias to action. It's not spending ages researching. It's just get out there and build the business and research as you go along. And just start things, start, fail, succeed. But be really fast, because I promise you, in your 40s and 50s, you lose that ability. You have a whole bunch of financial drains on you. I have 3 daughters. You have a whole bunch of other people who you're responsible for, and the ability to fail goes away. So you really want to be doing it now. Start, fail, bias to action. Just move really, really fast. Be super aggressive.
Saying that, what we really mean is we love our families very much as well,
Yeah.
don't we? Yeah, just to make sure we put that in. Okay, so skills then. What would you say are the biggest skills that you need to suggest for entrepreneurs?
Just to summarize his points, I think
You can't use his, you've got to have some new ones.
he's trying to say that don't get married early. Yeah. That's
You're
the big tip
26,
of
you've got
the day.
time to keep running, you're okay.
Okay, thank God. I tell them to my family as well. Anyway, I think 2 skills that we don't get to talk about a lot. The first one is, we talked about learning, but there's a skill behind, and that's the ability to learn. Do we all have the ability to learn? And that's perhaps one of the most important skills that you need to have as an entrepreneur, because going back to Athar's example, when you're building a business, it is like your baby. And for all of you parents here, if someone tells you how to perhaps groom your baby, you get offended. If your mother-in-law comes in and tells you that this is how you should be treating your baby, then you get offended. And that's what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs, because, being a part of the faculty at an incubation center in Lahore, I interact with a lot of startups, and, that's the first thing that you are trying to tackle, because they think they know everything, because they have built a business from scratch. It was their baby, it was their idea, and they think they know everything. So their ability to learn, their ability to take feedback, their ability to take criticism starts going down day by day. So I think you need to be able to learn new things. And only, for example, I had nothing to do with tech. I am a financier by background, but currently, alongside with running my startup, I'm also taking courses on product. just trying to, because, that's at the core of what we do. So you just need to make sure that, that ability is there. And the second thing is something that, unfortunately is not present in the startup ecosystem, that's honesty. The biggest skill that you need to, perhaps the second biggest, because I think I said ability to learn is the biggest one, is that you need to be honest. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to be honest with your team. You need to be honest with your investors. Something that certainly is missing from the startup ecosystem. And the most important one certainly is being honest to yourself. Why am I doing this? Is what I'm doing the right thing to do? You don't make false promises. And I think that's something that, if I was starting my business again, I would, these are two things that I would tell myself, that, have the ability to learn and be honest and true to yourself.
Okay, just make a note here. Man in crypto and fintech says must be honest. Is that what you just said? Okay, so when we talk about babies, it seems to come up in a conversation. How many people in here are parents? One or two people. Okay. How many people here were once babies? Now it's more inclusive, so we can move on with that. All right, let's go to the next question. So you've got this business, and you've got an entrepreneurial mindset. You've learned all these skills, and you jump and grow wings on the way down. What metrics should you use to be able to tell whether it's working or not? Because you're really keen and you're enthusiastic and you hope it's going to work. Does that mean that it's actually going to work? And how can you check with the analytics to make sure that everything is staying on track? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what Shershah just mentioned is the false hope. If you don't do the numbers and if you don't look at the metrics, you can't really analyze where your business is going. So I think honesty, being able to have targets to achieve, milestones that you want to achieve, and then looking back and understanding whether did you achieve those things, is this actually going to benefit the business? For example, my business, we had enormous growth in the beginning, but that growth doesn't last long because initially there's lots of hype, especially in my industry. There was so much hype in the beginning and everybody wants to get involved. But when the markets go down, the interest starts to decrease as well. So then you start to ask yourself, is your business only going to be a seasonal business that works in certain environments, or are you going to be a sustainable business that can win in any environment? And what do you have to look at? So for us, it's very important to look at the numbers. So I always check how much downloads we have on the App Store, how many people are actually buying the paid version of the app, understanding, is this going to be sustainable? Are we going to generate enough revenue for ourselves to fund ourselves, or do we need external funding? Have we raised funds, and how long do we have for these funds to help us run our business? Because nowadays it's very easy to raise funds. Many businesses find it not too difficult, especially if they have a great idea. But how do you make sure that the cash flow and the burn rate is decreasing while the potential for you to earn revenue is increasing? And you can't ignore the numbers there. You have to sit down, and if you're not the expert, you have to speak to the experts. If you don't know the exact numbers, if you don't know which metrics are the best for your industry, then you should speak to the experts who know these things. So that's where it's a team effort. You have to make sure you're speaking to the right people. If you're the person with the idea, then make sure you have the right person in accounting. You have the right developers working on your team. So everybody has to be, it's like a collective feedback. And these metrics will define whether your business is going to be successful or not. So it's very important. Like otherwise, you're just starting a business, raising funds, having a few customers, but you don't know how long it's going to last. And it's the worst feeling in the world where you think that your business is going to do well, but then everything crashes. So I think it's very important, these metrics. I think every business, of course, has its own metrics that you need to look at. So the examples I gave for my app is very sensible for me to look at these metrics, but for different businesses has different metrics. And yeah, it's very important.
Thank you. James, thoughts on metrics and feedback?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are two types of metrics that you're looking at. You're looking at metrics in relation to whatever business you're building, and then you're looking at metrics in relation to yourself. I think in terms of whatever business you're building, generally you want to pick a maximum of 3 metrics that really matter for the business that you're constantly monitoring and judging yourself on, whether that's monthly transacting users, monthly active users, retention rates, whatever that metric may be. And really, when you're raising funds, you also want to kind of broadly agree what the metrics are, because it's amazing how often businesses say our metric is X, and the funder is in the background saying, actually, we think Y is the metric. So it's better to have those conversations early on. That's part one. I think also, obviously, you always want to be on top of the financials for all the reasons that Athar said. It's unbelievably important, and it's amazing how many founders forget about that. I think in terms of yourself, it's worth really understanding where you're strong and where you're weak and where you're going to succeed and where you're going to fail. I would point everybody, there is an online test. I've done loads of them over the years because I'm quite interested in the psychology of entrepreneurship, and that I think is much better than everything else. It's called Career Leader, careerleader.com. And I think you pay $100, which is not that cheap. It's absolutely fantastic. It was built by 2 Harvard psychologists. And what they looked at is they interviewed people at the top of every single industry in the world who were firstly at the top of the industry, and secondly, they were really, really enjoying it, which matters to your point. And then they had them do a whole series of psychometric tests, and they mapped their capabilities. And then you do the same psychometric testing effectively, and it maps your capabilities to these different industries, the people who are at the top of them, and they're really happy at the top of them. And so essentially it then gives you a score, and so you can see really clearly that in my case, maybe I should go into occupational learning and development and build a business in that space because I find it really interesting teaching people, etc. Or maybe, and maybe I shouldn't go into law, which I did originally and I hated it, so I left it. And on Career Leader, it's like law, I'm like 5%, right at the bottom. So I know the test is good. And so I think it's a really, really good test. If you want to understand yourself and your capabilities and your aptitudes better, that's just a great one to do.
Very good.
Yeah. I think for me, every department within your company might have different metrics, and you need to be cognizant of that fact. But there is always, so we call it TOTM, the one metric that matters. So that's actually the metric that the whole company is working towards. And then, like Athar said, it can vary across different companies, across different industries. But be it the tech team, be it the business team, be it the operations team, they're all working towards one metric. And when you're starting your business, that's what you need to identify. That what's our one metric that matters, and we all look up to that. So of course, then you break that down into multiple different metrics. You distribute those across different teams, and they, all of those smaller metrics then converge and combine to become, the one metric that matters. And just tackling this question from a more of a theoretical point of view, I think being a business owner, being a founder, one thing that you need to always keep in mind that when you are committing, you always under-promise and you overachieve, especially when you're running a startup. And the reason for that is when you're a young company, you're still raising funds, you don't have a lot of capital, you don't have a lot of resources. There are so many externalities that can affect your business because, and you're not a Nestle who's been working for the past 100 years, or you're not a Toyota who's been working for the past 80 years. So things can really go wrong sometimes. And there's so many things that are not in your control, those externalities. And, as a venture-backed company, you're always in touch with the investors, communicating everything to them. Under-promise, overachieve, and keep a lot of margin for things that can go wrong, because trust me, things will go wrong, and they do. 90% of the times they do. Probably I'm not a good founder then, but they certainly go wrong. So always have that room there when you're building those metrics and when you're communicating those.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you a question now, to all three of you, and it's kind of like one of those job interview questions where they say to you, so what are your biggest faults? And you go, my biggest fault is I'm so successful, I don't know how I deal with it, or something like that. But I'm going to throw at you, what would you say your biggest mistakes have been in your journey? And if you were to turn a clock back, what would you have done differently?
I think it's kind of what I mentioned in the beginning. Like in the beginning, I had a mindset where I just want to be, I want to follow the glitter and the gold. I want to be a businessman, and I want to be successful. And sometimes that makes you rush. And especially if you're young, you make many decisions that you regret in the future. So one mistake that I made was I jumped into business without having the right mindset, or without understanding how to fund my business and how to have a long-term vision. And I think now I tell people, when I used to work, I used to hate my job. I used to feel depressed, and I had no sense of fulfillment. But now I realized if you change your mindset, all of these mistakes that I made, I want to make sure that nobody else makes these mistakes. So what I tell people is, if you have a job, it's great. What that means is you're investing your time in somebody else's business so they can invest their money into you and your business. So maybe the employers won't like this, but if they really understand, and if you go to work understanding that you're investing all of your time for this person's business to make sure it's successful, I'm sure they'll find it okay if now you think that they're investing their money into you and your business. Because the biggest return on investment for them would be that this great individual once worked for me. And that's an amazing feeling. So what I tell people is, you have to change your mindset. You have to use all your resources. If you're a student today, it's one of the best times to be a student. So much access to knowledge. So I think my failure was not using those resources properly or having the wrong mindset to flourish early on. But now, of course, I made so many mistakes, and now I get excited to make mistakes. So don't have any fear of failure. Fail fast and be excited to fail, because the biggest mistake is trying to be perfect. Nobody's perfect and no business is perfect. So yeah, so that would be my biggest lesson and biggest fault, was being afraid to fail. But now I'm not afraid. I want to keep failing. I don't want my business to fail, but I want to keep failing in many aspects of life so I can learn more.
It's all learning curve stuff, isn't it? That's
Absolutely,
ultimately.
yeah.
James, your thoughts on the mistakes you've made? Because I started like you in law and clearly didn't last very long.
Yeah. I think it's probably two. I didn't start being an entrepreneur early enough and young enough, and most of you, probably all of you actually in this audience, have that opportunity. And I think it's the opportunity you should be taking. You've got more energy, you've got far less to lose, and you can repeat and recycle much faster. I think the second thing would be is when you're building your business and it's growing really fast and it's successful, you actually want to still think in relatively short time frames. I think it's very easy to start to lengthen your time frame because you're like, well, this is going to last forever. And that was a mistake I made when I was building my business. We had incredibly fast growth for the space we were in, and it really, really grew fast. And we were just about to float it onto the alternative investment market on the London Stock Exchange, and COVID arrived. And it basically completely wiped out the business. I'd spent 6 years building this business. It was a big business, and it was worth millions and millions of dollars. Now, luckily, I've had a couple of IPOs with a couple of companies, so it wasn't a total personal disaster. But on the other hand, that would have been my biggest exit. And I missed out on it because I just waited too long. And there's always stuff that comes out of left field. Sometimes it's a regulatory change. Sometimes it's a pandemic. Sometimes it's something else. There's stuff that comes along that destroys what you've built or destroys a big piece of the value. And so the key, in fact, in hindsight, would have been take money off the table earlier. And that really means getting investors in earlier and taking a stake in their business, taking a stake in a roll-up. Just look in 2 or 3 year timeframes. I really think, because then you haven't wasted too long. I think when you're looking at 5 or 6 year timeframes, you start to have a lot of eggs of your lifetime energy and drive. You start to have a lot of eggs in that 5 year bucket, whereas you want loads of goes at 2 or 3 year buckets. It's a much better psychology. It gives you much more, a much greater sense of fire driving you, and energy and aggression, because you're looking at really short time frames. And so I think it creates the right mindset, which is I've got to get there really fast, and that's the mindset you want.
Before we go to Shershah, can I just return back to what you said then? When you build a business then, and your thoughts on, should you build it to sell it? Should you build it to live in it? Should you be, I'll just start it and see how it goes? Well, because most people do it because it's their passion, or it's because they find a gap in the market, and we don't even think about the sales bit at the end of it. Do you think that's a mistake?
No, I think that the best, and there's actually quite a lot of data and research on this, is that the best businesses are built out of passion. And so people are trying to build something that means something to them, whatever that meaning is, and people can find meaning in almost anything. People build financial services businesses, which I wouldn't find meaning in, but they actually find great meaning in it because their grandmother lost a whole bunch of money in the 2009 crash. So people find meaning everywhere, so I think you can never understand where somebody else is finding meaning. But I think that is really important, is this idea that I want to produce some sort of positive change. That tends to be the way those businesses grow fast. But at some stage, you start to think about how can I grow faster, and that usually requires more funding, unless it's a highly cash flow positive business, and that's rare. At some stage, you start to think about funding, and also at some stage, because you've worked unbelievably hard, you think, what's in it for me? And at that stage, you're looking for a sale, an investment, a float. There are, all of these different ways to exit the business, or just at least spread some of your risk. And I would argue that broadly, you want to do that at any time. You can't be sure that the crypto boom is going to carry on forever, that the fintech boom is going to carry on. And recently we've had a fintech winter.
Did you just diss their businesses then?
Yeah,
No,
I think so, yeah.
it's not about their businesses.
Fight.
It's about the environment. It's just the environment. The environments change. And you see it actually, and you see it, we've already had it in some parts of the crypto world. So I think that it's always about that being quick, but building it because it's something you're either really interested in, really passionate about. If you just build stuff to make money, it tends to come through. You have the wrong mindset. Your mindset is not a giving, driving value mindset. Your mindset is a taking mindset. And in fact, it's the giving, creating value, because actually it's creating that value that actually builds the money.
Just to add to that, and you're right about the passion thing, there's three things when I mentor people that we should look at. First of all, what are you really good at doing? So you know that you're very good at doing it. It's not just a bit of fun. What are you passionate about doing, and what will people pay for?
Yeah.
If you get those three things together, you've got a sustainable business that will keep you happy and you can do for a very, very long time. And it can be flexible enough as long as you have those basic metrics. Shershah, over to you. Mistakes in your 26 years.
Yep, I think, so I was 18 when I started my first company.
I could be your granddad, you know that. I don't think I am, but carry on.
I thought you were young. So I was 18 when I started my first company, wrapped that up in 2 years. Then I was 20 when I started my second one. And this is my third venture right out after college. I started this. I think that was the biggest mistake I did, because that's, as an advice, once you graduate from college, spend some time in the professional industry, because when I started out of college, I had zero network. I had no connections. I did not know how business operate. And because this was the first venture-backed business that I was building, and I lacked that basic experience that you would get from working within a company, within an organization, or a startup. So spend some time in the industry, because you find mentors there. You have senior people who've been in this industry for long. You learn from them, and that's when and like Athar said, you need to have something on the side that's making you enough money that you can sustain yourself, so your baby doesn't get too burdened by when you're relying on it. So give yourself that time in the industry. I think 2 to 3 years would be the right time for me, because then you get married like these guys there, and you have those regrets that I couldn't start early enough. I think that's the right time for it. The second thing is waiting for a perfect product. If I was to start this business again, initially, because I'm not a technical person, I got a co-founder on board from the same college that we were from, spent 1 year working on the product and trying to perfect it, and then left the company, and it was just me then. So if I was to start this again, I would start a business with nothing more than a Google form, and that's it. You don't wait for a proper product to be rolled out. You don't spend your energy and your resources on that, because in many cases what happens is you spend so much time on building a product, getting things perfect, that when you roll it out in the market, there's no user who wants to use it. Because we product managers, generally we have the fear of testing our products out, and the only people we talk to about our idea are our family. Your mother is always going to encourage you, right? She thinks you are the most good-looking person in the world. Well, we know that's not true. So if you take your idea to your friends, they'll say that it's a good idea, because if he bashes you on that idea, you probably won't be sitting with him the next day. So those people are kind of obliged to tell you that what you're working is a good idea. So what you need to do is, if you have an idea today, give yourself 3 months. Within that 3 months time frame, spend 1 month on research, 2 to 4 weeks on developing an MVP. It can only be a Google form as well. That takes a couple of hours. And then 1 month on testing it out and talking to the actual consumers. For example, if you're selling or making something for college students, you need to go inside a university or in a college and talk to those customers if they will be willing to use your service. And then the second thing is, it's not just about getting signed. To say 2 things. One is having customers, and the second thing is having paying customers. if I offer you something today, you might sign up for it, but the day I ask you to pay 100 riyals for it every month, you might not stop using my service altogether. So, that's how you gradually build that up. So, two mistakes that I did. Started on this too early, right after I graduated. And the second one is they're waiting for the perfect product to be out in the market. Just start off with whatever you had and get it out in the market and test it out.
Makes a lot of sense. That's why you wanted to say something on the back of that, didn't you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a real life example from Legion Network because we kind of touched on examples in my life, but in Legion Network, I just want to give an example of a mistake that we made and it made our business better. So in the beginning, we had some crazy growth like we mentioned, and we expected our bills for our server to be around $15,000 a month based on the estimation. And we had all of these millions of people joining the app. And in the first month of our bills from AWS, it was way over 6 figures. And this meant that we couldn't continue the momentum that we started because it was not sustainable. So we made a mistake with we were not using a CDN. So this is like quite technical. If we were using a CDN, we would have not had this mistake. And that stopped us from going from 4 million to 40 million based on the momentum. So we had to learn from this mistake. And not only did we learn from this mistake, now we made sure that every part of our business and the application is cost efficient. So we had to make that big mistake, have to pay those unnecessary big bills, and that really improved our business because now every element of our business, we really criticize whether we've architected it in the right way.
We've got 3 minutes left. We can take one question and very quickly get it answered. If somebody's got a question, then you can ask it now. That gentleman there with the nice glasses on. Wait, get microphone. Say who you are and then say a question. Switch it on first.
All right, hi.
3 minutes is finished, thank you.
Right.
So, no, go on.
That was a fantastic talk, first of all. My name is Ahmed, I'm a high schooler. So this question is sort of off topic, but what unexpected ways did becoming an entrepreneur affect your life? Obviously becoming an entrepreneur, it had a big effect on your day-to-day life. So what unexpected ways did it change it?
I'll jump in with this one before we send it along the line. Being an entrepreneur for me meant I didn't have to get anyone else's permission to do what I do on a daily basis. I work for me, my family, and if people don't like it, it's not my problem.
Except your wife.
Yeah. So,
except your wife's permissions, yeah?
That's our thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's having the opportunity to share knowledge, being able to come to forums like this. It's not something that I really aimed for, but because of the success associated to what you do, you have the opportunity which you don't expect. Being able to share knowledge and inspire others. It's not something that I expected to happen at this age, but it's a true privilege.
I think you need to be really clear about why you want to be an entrepreneur. Broadly, do you want the lifestyle? Do you want the toys and all the fancy stuff? Or do you want the freedom? Or is it that you want to have social impact or some other impact? And you need to be really clear because you can get some of those things actually without being an entrepreneur. You can get the lifestyle by living in the right city at the right time. Every city has its moment in the sun. And Hong Kong in the 90s, San Francisco in the 2000s, yada, yada. Everybody was having an amazing time. You had the lifestyle, right? So I think the way it impacts your life is that your life becomes more extreme. Your highs are higher and your lows are lower. I think that's the part. Your financial highs are higher, your financial lows are lower as well, so it becomes tiring from that point of view. But the excitement is huge. I think the other thing is to make sure that when you go down that journey that you're not neglecting family, relationships, friends, because it's very easy to become obsessed. And at some stage, you suddenly realize, actually, that's a negative. So you have to really be very deliberate about making time for all those relationships. Otherwise, you get a lot of very, very, very wealthy top-level entrepreneurs, and that's all they have. They have no relationships, no family. So that's something to be avoided. Sorry.
Yeah, all that money must make them sick.
Yeah.
I think just to very quickly sum it up, I think one thing that I didn't know, something that was unexpected for me, was that this is not just a business, it's actually a lifestyle that you're adopting. Because once you start working 16 hours a day, which I initially did for the first 1 or 2 years, you have no time for your family, you have no time for your friends. I live with my family in the same home, because we had a very similar culture in Pakistan. Too, I don't get to see my nieces like 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 days in a stretch, or despite living in the same home. So it's a lifestyle that you adopt. You'll have your friends cursing you because you don't meet them. But you need to make sure that your mental health always comes first. Always keep that in mind. You have time for other things. You have time to go out to the gym. You have time to go out for a run. You have time for other things too. Because if you get too into it, trust me, I'll give you a year max. After that, you'll be so burned out that you'll be looking to do something else, and that's not where you want to end up at.
Talking about burnout, we've run out of time, unfortunately. So I've got to thank, first of all, Athar and then James and Shershah for being amazing guests. Give them a round of applause. But most of all, thank you to you guys for the great welcome you've given us in your country, and also the fact that even though Cristiano Ronaldo was out there, you stayed with... No, he wasn't really. You stayed with us. Give yourselves a massive round of applause, and thank you so much.